All right, good morning, class. We are going to be learning about passive and active voice. So, what is voice? Voice is the form of a verb it takes to indicate whether the subject of the verb performs or receives the action. And there are two types of voice, obviously, like I mentioned before, passive and active. So, active voice indicates that the subject of the verb is acting. The subject does or acts upon the verb. In such sentences, the sentences are to be said in the active voice. The subject acts upon the verb. That might be a quiz question. I suggest you write it down. So here are some examples. Don't write every single one of these examples down. Feel free just to write one or pick one that you find is the most helpful to you. So the dog jumped onto the boy. The dog is the subject, and it is doing the jumping, which is the verb. Christy will give a book report to the class, Christy being the subject, giving is the verb. The computer ate my paper, the computer is the subject, eating is the verb. So passive voice. In a passive voice sentence, the subject and the object switch places. The subject becomes a passive recipient of the action. The subject is being acted upon. The subject is being acted upon. If I'm saying something twice, that probably means it's going to be a quiz question. So passive voice examples, again, like the active voice examples, I want it to be similar just so that you guys can visually see the difference. The boy was jumped on by the dog. The boy being the subject, being jumped on is the verb. A book report will be given by Christy to the class. Report is the subject, given is the verb. My paper was eaten by the computer. Paper is the subject, being eaten is the verb. So why use active voice? I'm never going to teach you guys something and never tell you why you're going to be using it. So most writers use active voice to be more direct. How I like to explain this is before TVs or before colored TVs, we used to watch TVs in black and white or movies in black and white. And we can understand TV in black and white. We understand what they're saying, we hear what they're saying, we see the characters moving, but active voice is like adding color because we don't live in a black and white world, we live in a colored world. So using active voice kind of brings your writing to life. It makes it now 3D. So an example, I pet my dog. In active voice. Passive would be the dog was being pet by me. Do we see the visual difference? Okay, I'm going to move on. Reasons to use active voice. It reads less awkward and it clearly states the relationship between the subject and the action. So passive, she did not get asked to prom by Johnny. Active, Johnny did not ask her to prom. So what differences do you find between the two sentences? The passive one, it kind of reads a little bit awkward. Do you see what I mean by awkward? She did not get asked to prom by Johnny. But when we could say it, just Johnny did not ask her to prom. So when to use passive voice? I don't want you guys to think that passive voice is bad because it's not. It's great. It's fine. So here are some situations where passive voice is perfectly fine. You're going to use passive voice when you don't know or don't want to reveal the performer of an action. So genres like mystery or murder mystery or science fiction might use passive voice because they don't want to reveal who is doing the subject. If I wrote a murder mystery that said Johnny killed Sally with a knife, yes, it is active voice. But if I wrote something more suspenseful, like Sally was killed. Well, Sally was killed by who? It leads more suspense. Like it reads more suspenseful. So awkward passive voice. My bike was repainted by Jake. Deliberate passive voice was my bike was repainted. Let's move on. So forms of passive voice. The passive voice requires like that weird double verb, and it will consist of a to be verb and ends with an en, an ed, or a t. So example, the ring was proposed by Nick. Was is a to be verb. We all know what to be verbs are. Is, are, was, were situation. So what is the active form of this sentence? I'm going to give you guys a minute to think about it, write it down in your notes, and then we're going to come back to it. So what should I be looking out for? Passive voice will normally contain a by phrase indicating who or what performed the action. Passive sentences can be easily transformed into active sentences when the object of the preposition by is moved to the object position in the sentence. So there's this really cool rule that works just about 95% of the time. The rule by zombies is such an amazing gift to us, even though it's so simple. If it makes sense at the end of your sentence, then it is in passive voice. If it does not make sense, it is in active voice. For example, a famous president once said, I think it was JFK, mistakes were made. Do we remember that to be verb? Is, are, was, were. Mistakes were made. So there's that to be verb. Mistakes were made by who? Mistakes were made by zombies. If that grammatically makes sense, it's in passive voice. So if I were to fix that sentence, it would be zombies made mistakes. So here's your turn, passive to active voice. You're going to change it. These are passive sentences. You're going to change them to active. The statue is being visited by hundreds of tourists every year. I'm going to give you guys a little bit of time, and then I'm going to reveal the answer. So the active voice of that would be, the active voice of that would be tourists visit the statue every year. You can get rid of words like by hundreds, you can get rid of, you can edit the sentences to just make it more concise. Passive to active again, the ring was found by a man on the beach. I'm going to give you a little bit of wait time. The active form of this sentence is the man found a ring on a beach. And that's kind of it. You're moving the subject up front. Sunrise Mountain football players could never be beat by Ironwood football players. Active voice would be Ironwood football players could never beat Sunrise Mountain football players. Do we see the difference? Okay. The ankle was broken by Dak Prescott. I'm going to give you some wait time. Feel free to write these down. If you feel like the previous examples just didn't do you justice, but this is just like a practice with the whole class. So active voice would be Dak Prescott broke his ankle. So we're going to change from active to passive because, again, I don't want you to think that passive voice is bad. Okay, Kansas City Chiefs won the Super Bowl this past year. So think about it. I know that we've been doing passive to active, so turn that switch on, active to passive. So the answer would be the Super Bowl was won by the Kansas City Chiefs. Again, you can get rid of the words past year. Edit it down. There's nothing wrong with it. You still get the point across. Many fans miss Kobe Bryant playing on the court. I'm going to give you some wait time. Passive voice would be Kobe Bryant is missed by many fans. Even if, let's do that by zombies tactic. So if I were to say Kobe Bryant is missed by zombies, does that make sense? Of course it does. It grammatically makes sense. The sentence flows perfectly. It's passive voice. So Nicholas Spooner proposed to Jalen last month. Yes, that's me and my fiance. So it would be passive voice. Jalen was proposed to by Nicholas Spooner. Do you see how like that kind of reads a little bit awkward? We kind of want to cut that awkwardness because it's not deliberate. DeAndre Hopkins scored a touchdown last weekend. So to passive voice, it would be last weekend, there was a touchdown scored by DeAndre Hopkins. Again, kind of reads a little bit awkward. You want to be deliberate. And that's the end of the slideshow. And I hope you found some value into that. So your job is, I know that we've been reading The Great Gatsby, and I want you to take on the character of someone from The Great Gatsby and write a letter using only active voice. And you're going to turn it in to me on Monday. All right. Thanks, guys. I appreciate it.